Winning Edge features Associated Electric's Roger Curtis and Gene Husting, the designers of the RC10. And from Reedy Motors, Mike Reedy. Also, world-class mechanic Jim Halsey shows you modifications to improve your car's performance. And finally, meet the world champion driver Jammin, who gives you the winning edge on racing.
When we decided to get into off-road and design the RC10, we felt we had to do some experimenting first. So we looked at the cars that were available at that time to see what we can improve upon, and then we also looked at full-scale full-scale off-road cars, and talked to some of the people in that business. I looked at a lot of cars at that time and came up with ideas based on those experiences. And as I said, we had a lot of experience from 8th scale cars and 12th scale. So from that point, then we started to build experimental cars. This is one of the first ones. It was nothing like an RC10, but it allowed us to test shocks. In this case, we thought we might be able to use a shock that we already had. This is the shock from the RC500, and this car essentially showed us that, first of all, the shocks were very important, and secondly, that a small shock like the one on the 500 wasn't adequate for the job. So this was number one here. Well, this is my car. It was one of the about 6 prototypes that we built when we finally had achieved a design that we were pretty comfortable with. I ran this car at the New Jersey Off-Road Nationals. That was the first Nationals for off-road cars. That was sponsored by Roar, and I did pretty well with this. For a guy who hasn't raced for a long time, I was in the A main and did very well. Of course, we had a big advantage because there was only 6 of these cars there. This car looks a lot like the RC10. It's basically like the finished product, except that a lot of these parts are handmade. Chassis, for instance, is made by hand. It doesn't, you wouldn't believe it, but it's been hammered over a mold, and if you got up really close, you'd see some of the dents. This is one of our first production parts down here. That was the front A-arm. That was molded. That's a handmade part there. These inner mounts here suspension mounts are handmade. Of course, all the fiberglass stuff was cut out by hand. This car, I ran this car for probably 2 years or so. After that, I don't think I changed a part on it. So we were pretty confident after doing that we had a car that would be rugged. Well, this is the final product. This is what you get when you buy an RC10. Pretty close to the final product. It has a chrome or metallized wheels. The actual car doesn't have those. I think this is pretty much a stock car. We use all engineering, what they call engineering materials in the RC10, which means materials that are the highest strength to weight ratio that's available. Kind of things they use in aircraft and so on. So the chassis is made out of aircraft aluminum. It's 6061 T6 aluminum. Dog bones in the back of the car. It's the way that the power is transferred from the transmission to the rear wheels, and it allows that power to be transferred without interfering with the suspension action. We have a special machine that makes dog bones, about 1 every 30 seconds. Well, when I designed the car, I drew 2 lines on the paper. One line was the ground, and then the other line about 1.5 inches above it was the bottom of the chassis. And the intention was to make a car that had plenty of clearance under it and would have the ability to travel over a really rough terrain. So if you look at the RC10, it's very clean underneath. There's nothing hanging down below that line that I drew on the paper. In keeping with the idea of having a lot of clearance under the car, it meant that the transmission had to transfer the power out at a very low position on the chassis, because if the transmission had its output shafts up high, then the dog bones would have to angle down far too much. So this transmission was designed to have output shafts right on the chassis level, and that allowed the dog bones to be level when the car is sitting on the ground. And when the dog bones are level, then you get the maximum efficiency of power transfer between the transmission and the wheels. Well, we tried to make the suspension adjustable, and it's probably more adjustable than most people realize. There are things on here that we haven't even explored ourselves. The upper arm in the front end is, of course, adjustable in length, which allows you to change the static camber. So if you shorten this arm, the wheel would tilt this way, and if you lengthen it, it would tilt that way. You have to make that adjustment when you're on the track to determine the tire wear and get the car to handle correctly. But you can also adjust the roll center of the car, and that would be achieved by moving this inner pivot on the upper arm. It can be moved into any of these hold positions. The position it's in right now is in and up. That would be what you would call a parallel A-arm suspension, and in that position the roll center is near the ground. You can also move this pivot point all the way down and out to where it's on the outer hole in here. That would make the rear suspension have a higher roll center, more like a swing axle suspension. If I'm out trying to have fun racing, I don't really spend a lot of time maintaining the car. It's not necessary. The car is perfectly capable of running for a long time without doing anything to maintain it. If I'm serious about racing, then I'm going to spend more time on it. Every heat, I'm going to take a look at the car. I'd probably get in and change the grease in the differential each time, look the car over to make sure there are no loose screws, and check the action of the suspension. It's really very important that the suspension be able to move freely up and down, and sometimes that's hard to see. It may feel okay with the spring and the shock on there, but if you took this and disconnected the shock down here and moved the suspension arm without the spring on it, you might find that it was binding a little bit. You should be able to lift this up and have it drop all the way down freely and have it not bind at all. You can learn a lot by just dropping the car. If you watch it after it hits the ground, the chassis goes down and then it comes up and comes to a stop. And that's when the oil is correct and matches the stiffness of the springs. But if the oil is too light, then when you drop it, the chassis is going to go up and down several times. You'll see an oscillation in there, and that would be as if you had no shocks at all. And if the oil is too heavy, when you drop it, the chassis is not going to go down as far, but you'll see the tires start to bounce. It'll do something kind of like that. You'll get a lot of bouncing action in the rubber itself. The purpose of the differential is to allow the rear wheels to rotate more or less independently of each other. So if you take the car and go like this, you'll see that one rear wheel is moving one direction, the other one's moving the other way. On the track, the car is turning most of the time. You're